On June 24, 1892, Amber Murray placed an advertisement in the Sydney Morning Herald in search of a motherly person to take care of her baby boy in exchange for payment. Amber received a letter from an E. Hill. The person offered to adopt Horace Murray and promised to give him a mother's love and attention. Amber met the couple with Horace. The couple commented that the baby would be perfect for them as they had recently lost a son of their own. Amber paid the couple £3 and the man signed the adoption documents with the name John Leslie before crossing out Leslie and writing Hill. Amber Murray left the home in Redfern, never seeing her son Horace again. John made excuses every time she came to see her baby, and then one day, when Amber came to the home, the family was gone. On June 21, 1892, Minnie Davies placed an advertisement in the Sydney Morning Herald in search of a kind person to adopt her baby girl, Minnie Bothamley. A man named John Burt offered to take care of the girl. Minnie and her husband Horace went to the Redfern home the next day and agreed to pay John and his wife Sarah 10 shillings a week for them to take care of their daughter. The adopting couple also agreed that the pair could come and see the girl whenever they wanted. When Davies and Bothamley next visited, they learnt that the family had moved to a house in McDonalds Town and resumed visiting their daughter every Saturday. On July 23, John informed the parents that Minnie had a cold. Then a few days later, he sent them a letter saying that the girl had died. Her parents arrived with a bunch of flowers and viewed her body. John said that a coffin had been ordered and he would bury Minnie for another £2. On October 11, 1892, 2 men were digging a trench in the backyard of a home in McDonalds Town when they discovered decomposed remains. The men believed it was a cat, but the following morning they found the body of a female baby buried about 30 yards from the previously discovered remains, which turned out to be the body of a baby boy. It was estimated that the female had been buried for about 6 weeks and the male about 3 months. The tenants of the house had only lived at the location for a short period and were not responsible for burying the bodies. Investigators checked records and learned that John Makin and his wife Sarah had previously lived at the house. They were tracked down to a house in Chippendale and along with 4 of their daughters arrested. Investigators visited every house the Makins had lived in since 1890. There are 11 in total. It turned out the discovery of the 2 aforementioned remains was just the tip of the iceberg, as a disturbing operation was uncovered. On the McDonalds Town house, 7 bodies were discovered. They were aged between 10 days to 8 months old. One body was found at the house on Zamia Street, Redfern, and another 4 were located at the house on George Street, Redfern, another at the house on Alderson Street, Redfern, and finally 2 were discovered at the house in Chippendale. All 15 babies had been buried in the backyard of the homes. Due to the state of the remains, a cause of death was unable to be determined. John and Sarah Makin married in 1871 and had 10 children of their own, 5 sons and 5 daughters. John worked as a delivery man, but after suffering an injury that left him unable to work, he and his wife turned to the world of baby farming, the practice of caring for illegitimate babies in exchange for payment. John and Sarah Makin were charged with murder. The trial was held in the Sydney Supreme Court in front of a packed courthouse that flowed out to the street. While the defence argued that the Makins were professional carers who looked after babies for a weekly fee until the mother was able to return to the child, the prosecution painted a different picture. Instead of looking after the babies, the Makins had found it easier and more profitable to murder them while continuing to receive the weekly payments from the mother, who were always turned away from seeing their child through deception. Amber Murray testified at the trial about her experiences with the Makins. Her son Horace was among the babies buried in the backyard of the George Street Redfern home. Makin's daughter Clarice testified that when the family moved to McDonalds Town, Horace was gone. Three other mothers identified clothing that had been pawned by Sarah Makin as belonging to their babies. On March 9, 1893, John and Sarah Makin were found guilty of murdering Horace Murray. After a lengthy appeal, the judges confirmed the convictions. At the sentencing hearing, John Makin continued to plead his innocence, while his wife largely hid her face behind a handkerchief. The judge would state, "You took money from the mother of this child. You beguiled her with promises which you never meant to perform, and which you never did perform, having determined on the death of the child. You deceived her as to your address, and you endeavoured to make it utterly fruitless that any search should be made, and finally, in order to make detection impossible, as you thought, having bereft it of life, you buried this child in your yard, as you would the carcass of a dog. No one who has heard the case must believe that you are engaged in baby farming in its worst aspect. 3 yards of houses in which you live testify, with that ghastly evidence of these bodies, that you are carrying on this nefarious, this hellish business of destroying the lives of these infants for the sake of gain." The judge sentenced the Makins to death. As the verdict was made, Sarah Makin collapsed in the dock. After 2 further appeals were dismissed, John Makin was executed by hanging on August 15, 1893. The 48-year-old left 2 written statements, one to his children and the other protesting his innocence. Sarah Makin's death sentence ruling was overturned. She was instead sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labour. As her health worsened over the years, her daughters pleaded for her release, which was granted after 19 years behind bars. Just over 25 years after the execution of her husband, Sarah Makin died of heart failure at the age of 72.